submitters. We've just got a slight amendment which we just need to get everyone's approval. So we've got a late submission from Gary Bocock, and Gary would like to speak, but could I just first move that we accept Gary's late submission? Could I have a seconder for that?
I'll move.
Councillor Van Beek. All those in favour?
All right.
Right, passed. Thank you. So welcome, Gary. We look forward to your submission.
Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors, staff. Can I read from my submission, or is it?
You do,
Okay.
yeah, whatever you want.
Okay. I've been fully involved in vertebrate pest control for 51 years, as you can see by the grey hairs. Semi-retired, now work for my son sometimes. I've been fully involved in 2 successful eradication programs carried out, and a lot of varied possum control, ranging from shooting through to aerial poisoning. I support moving to a contractor delivery model for the following reasons. As a contractor, continuity of work for the contractor, who will know that if his performance is correct, he'll be able to retain, train staff and develop a career path. To be able to work in one big area and not have to travel all over the region and outside it, doing 1 or 2 properties and then travelling to the opposite end of the region to do another couple of properties, saving time, travel, downtime, administration costs, etc. The ratepayer contractor relationship is critical to the ongoing success of the possum control program. Other points, iwi land. Some unoccupied iwi land is leased out for grazing or to other organisations for wild game hunting. Therefore, some of these areas need to be paying the same rates as other PCA areas. Forestry land. Exotic forestry has to be brought under the same rules as the ratepayers of all PCAs. I think that's pretty well documented. Again, large exotic forestry blocks are leased out and grazed as winter runoffs. So there's your good reason for it to be under the same controls. There's a lot of justifiable complaints from ratepayers and contractors regarding possums coming in from exotic forests where little or not enough control is being done. They aid to eat their grass and crops as well as potential to spread TB. The 500-metre rule does not apply to possums. Possums do travel large distances to come out to eat on crops or new grass in spring. Dock land. Dock do not pay rates. It will contribute very little to the control of possums in the dock areas, pasture margins and the PCA areas. And the same applies to that 500-metre rule. Again, I think somehow should be paying a fair percentage of the area to be controlled. Osprey. There needs to be much better cooperation between Osprey and the regional council contractors. In the past, when Osprey had finished in an area and moved out, it would be taken over by the regional council. Osprey would not pass on the bait station set-up information of farms to contractors or regional council, resulted in wasted bait stations set up and further costs for the regional council contractors in time and materials. In Osprey's case, I'm also against large one contractor base, as what was happening with Osprey before Osprey, it was Animal Health Board, where they introduced into Hawke's Bay target pest control from the Environment Canterbury, and that ended up as a disaster. It did not give contractors a very good name. It is documented fairly well. In certain areas in Hawke's Bay, in the PCA programs, there are areas that are going to need aerial poisoning with 1080 or other poisons. For example, in exotic, native bush and scrublands, to achieve the results you're going to need. If you go in there with manpower, it's going to take a long time and costs, as against aerial. And I'm just looking at the financial costs of it. There are contractors in Hawke's Bay who can carry out this work, but will need some help in the form of costs from the regional councils to achieve this method. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Any questions? I'll start then. Around the aerial work and suggesting the product or products to use, you know, you've been in the industry a long time. Do you see technology sort of coming up with any alternatives? There's a lot of obviously hesitation and pushback on aerial dropping of poison.
No, yes and no. There is in the way of delivery of the poisons. There are drones coming on board. They are getting better and better at it, at targeted areas and control. It went from the days when I first started at putting it out at 10 kgs a hectare down to 1 kg a hectare in helicopters, from fixed wings to helicopters, now to drones, yes. As regards to poison, no. I think it's been looked at from government agencies and everything else to try and find something better. There's not. There's a list of documents on 1080, it's miles high, proving it is safe and thing. There is a few, bit of cultural hesitance against it in some areas, but at this stage, I don't know of any new poisons that are coming out. There are new poisons to put on the ground, but to get it for aerial is a big problem, and that's into legislation and government problems. Out of my control.
Yeah, thank you for your submission. As an experienced and past experienced contractor, and continuity of work is actually very important, as you say, and I understand it, because you become far more efficient with your staffing ratios, your training, you're having all your staff being well trained, rather than calling in some additional staff if you've got a big block to do and then you put them all off, so it doesn't work. Is there enough capacity within Hawke's Bay, so to speak, to actually do this kind of work? And if not, is it possible to actually scale up relatively quick? What is sort of the appetite of, say, the younger workers to actually join this industry? From your view?
Yeah, my view is I've also been involved in mahi quite a long time, from the day one, way before this. And my calculation was I went to them and said to the local iwi that we would grab staff and train them up. We would not grab some of their staff they had already, because you need a clean slate to have poison licences, firearms licences and that. We would go to the schools and look for the local people who weren't going to go to university but were able to do an apprenticeship type thing, and take them and train them up. And there is a training program out there for it, so that they could come on, and then out of all of that you could get one or two that could go on and be contractors in their own right. But it is going to take a bit of time.
And there is an industry-led training program in place, is there?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further questions? No? Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Good timing, Rhea. Welcome, Federated Farmers.
Are we ready?
Welcome. Yeah, you start when you're ready.
Oh, great. It's our pleasure to be here to talk about the possum control changes. I haven't really prepared a speech because I thought we could just tell you some things that our farmers have been telling us about possum control experiences on their own properties, and provide a lot of time for you to ask questions of us. So, as you know, a lot of farmers have received their rates demands for the year ahead, and we would really like to emphasise that we hope that the changes can be cost neutral for the council. My own farm, we've had a 20% increase in regional council rates alone this year, and we're already struggling with inflationary pressures with fertiliser, a lot of other things. In fact, so much so that we are considering not continuing our lease property for the years ahead. We're just finding that we can't afford it as a small family farming business, and a lot of our other members are feeling the same way. So we would really, really like the changes to be cost neutral. The other thing a lot of our farmers were talking about was forestry. So I noted in the, I think it was the cost-benefit analysis, it was discussed that forestry had perhaps a lower benefit or a lower exacerbating factor, but that doesn't really play out with what our members are seeing who live next door to forestry properties. So we would like to see the council utilise perhaps some differentials for different land uses to ensure that, so we can use that for urban properties as well, to ensure that the contributions that different land uses are paying for reflect the level of service and the level of benefit they are receiving, or perhaps the exacerbator effect as well. So we can acknowledge that everybody in the whole region gets a biodiversity benefit, and perhaps landowners, farmers also get a TB control benefit as well. Using differentials and a targeted rate means that we can rate accordingly for all these different benefits that different land uses take. Since we've lodged the submission, Jim's had a few more conversations with other members.
Certainly, they're supporting of the council taking it back, begrudgingly to a certain extent, because they've seen that they might do their job really well, but it's hit and miss. There's been new people come into the area, don't understand what their requirements are and their obligations are. There's people did it last year, but actually it's 3 or 4 or 5 years ago since it was done. And so I think if one person can control it and keep a regular your program going, and it'll be done at a better standard and be beneficial for everyone in the long term. So that was sort of the main feedback that was there. One lot would like to have kept it, but if changes come in with the Poisons Act, that you can't do it yourself, that's a potential issue. And certainly I think keeping it as a targeted rate where it's going to a certain bucket rather than just out of the general, I think would be better for everyone, because any ratepayer can see that they are paying this much towards biodiversity enhancement, so whether they're urban, rural, whatever. So I think that's something that was well worthwhile doing.
Yeah, we did really like the partnership approach over the last number of years that we've had it, but it seems like it's reached a crescendo, and so we need to change up how we do it. So we did really like that partnership method. A lot of our farmers were very diligent, but they are also accepting that there were a lot of people out there who either didn't know how to do it correctly, or perhaps found it difficult to find the time to do it. So we are accepting that the change is necessary. So we're available for any questions for further clarification.
Great, thank you.
I'll start as usual. Thank you for your submission. And it was really great reading. Lot of anecdotal stuff, which is real that you encounter amongst your members, which is what we really needed to hear. So cost neutral. Are you saying cost neutral as in a farmer spends $2,500 on pest control, possum control, therefore annually, therefore what if he actually would drop that cost and then he gets rated, it should be no more than $2,500 annually, or is it should actually be no increase in rates at all, so to speak? What's cost neutral in your?
I think farmers feel like that their rates bills have gone up enough in the last few years, and particularly for the 10 years that we're looking at ahead. We would prefer cost neutral as in the council costs and not an increase in rates. We've already, absorbed quite a lot of increase in rates already. I understand the council's already subsidising a lot of possum control materials. Perhaps it hasn't been taken up as much, but I wonder then if there's extra in the budget that hasn't been used, considering you haven't been selling as much poison as you thought you might have been. So I don't think there's going to be much, if any, appetite for any increased rates.
Okay.
And there is certainly opportunity for, economies with having a bigger, as a previous speaker said, that a contractor can go in an area and do a whole area, hit an area instead of having to travel. So you're going to get economies of scale and efficiencies. So there should be good ways of reducing cost there.
And are you aware that we're actually moving more towards general rate? Because we believe that biodiversity is not something that only a land user needs to be taken care of, take responsibility for and pay for, because it's a requirement by all of those who live in Hawke's Bay.
We do, and we don't favour any increases in the general rate. We would prefer that you do a targeted rate specifically for this activity. And I have put forward an idea for a number of years now that a animal pest targeted rate has two aspects to it. One is the flat fee per property, and people in town would pay that as well, and that would rate for the general public good of increased biodiversity. So that's an equal benefit. So say $5, I'm picking a number out of the air, $5. Every ratepayer in the entire region pays $5, regardless of what property they have. And then you have perhaps a land value rate with a differential applied on it, which acknowledges that bigger properties or rural properties receive more benefit, say, than a town or an urban or a residential property. And then you could have a differential based on land use, say farming or forestry, or other types of land uses there. So we would prefer a targeted rate. We don't really like too much of an increase in the general rate because it is based on land value. It means that our farmers with high land value properties are contributing more regardless. And someone in town with, say, like a $200,000 land value property or less, they receive the same biodiversity benefit as everyone else does. So we would prefer that targeted rate. We're also a bit concerned the general rate. When you look at your rates bill, it just says general rate $1,000. You don't know where that money's going. You don't know how it's changing. And we also like to see there's more accountability when we match up what the council has been spending on possum control versus what it's been rating us for. A general rate tends to hide all that information to the average ratepayer.
So that's the mixed model rate.
Yeah, with the
what you're talking about.
So
you talk about that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So we've suggested that for a good decade now. Really like to have some success on this. I think it's a really great idea. You've got so many rating tools at your, available to you. And I think that the flat fee per property would be a really great way to recognise that biodiversity benefit that we all equally receive.
finished. You,
Yep.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate your submission. I'm just thinking the current funding model is 70% targeted rate, 30% general rate. It's proposed to switch that to a 30% targeted rate, 70% general rate. So to my mind, that essentially does become a differential rate because the targeted rate is struck on land area, which means bigger properties pay more, but every property pays a certain amount. And under the general rate, obviously there's going to be a swing of the rating incidence towards the urban and higher capital value properties in the commercial residential areas.
Is it capital or land value?
Land value. The general rate's on land value.
Okay, my mistake. I made an assumption there. So, yeah, that doesn't quite address everything you wanted, but
No.
change to capital value it would.
Yeah, but,
basically.
you know, the regional council rates on land value, because it's, you know, the works you do for the benefit and the service of land, rather than the capital,
Well,
like a council does.
And maybe only in Hawke's Bay.
Are you considering a change to capital value?
No, I'm speculating.
We've got lots of great
I'm-
ideas and examples of
I'm
how you
more
could do that
used
too.
to general rating being based on capital value, so yeah, I hadn't appreciated it.
I have been told in previous years that one of the reasons why small properties under 4 hectares hadn't been rated for animal pest control was because the number the rate was struck on meant that properties that were under 4 hectares, it became uneconomic for the council to collect rates from that property. So it was going to be like a couple of cents, you know, which didn't cover your admin costs of actually going out and collecting that. So the flat fee idea solves that problem by, say, if you rate every single property in the region $5 or whatever it's struck on, it does become economic for you to collect for those smaller properties.
So a UAGC, Uniform Annual General Charge is what you're suggesting.
It'd be a targeted, like it'd be animal, I've got one here in my bill and it's animal pest strategy for southern region. So it'd be animal pest strategy or biodiversity. It would be a number for biodiversity, which is for that bucket.
Yeah, and then you can easily see it on your rates demand.
Yep.
You know, Jim's paying $121 for animal pests. He can see how that changes over the years. You know, I think your urban rate payers, if they saw, say, you know, animal pest strategy or a biodiversity improvement rate on there, they could see how much they're contributing that and feel good that they're contributing to better biodiversity in their region. And then we are also assured that that money that is collected for that activity stays with that activity. You don't get tempted in a year that's not a long-term plan year to think,
We would
I think we'll
never
just
do that. We would
change.
Jackie?
Thank you, Chair. So it's not really a question, it's more of just clarification from you, from what I'm hearing, is that of course there are some farmers who are doing a really good job on their own.
Yes.
But is it, through your submission, is it fair to say that they recognise that they do a good job, but also know that there are others who aren't, and are so happy to support this, regardless of their good work, knowing
Yes,
that there are others
yeah.
who aren't up to
That was
scratch?
exactly the message that we received. We had some members ring up or email and tell us that they had put a considerable amount of effort, or that they were particularly skilled because they used to work in that field, and that it disappointed them that, say, the neighbouring area hadn't been performing quite so well, or that perhaps the forest that they were living next to hadn't been pulling their weight. So yes, that is a very accurate statement.
Thank you.
And certainly possums are equal opportunity investors. They don't care where they are. They're quite happy to live in the forestry or wherever. So there's no there's not a lot of a difference between the areas.
Councillor Ben Bate kind of stole my question, but so more just a comment and perhaps further conversation. But Jim, you made the comment about new people coming into the area and not knowing, in this instance, the PCA program. And, there's lots of other things they probably should know in regards to regional council things going on. And so it's probably just a conversation to have with staff here about, what can we do around comms to people moving into the area and developing those relationships sooner rather than people just turning up and not complying with some of the programs being undertaken.
Thinking about that, I had a look at your possum pamphlet online, and I think maybe that could do with a bit of an update.
Okay, yeah, well, look, any feedback on that sort of thing, because as I said, it's bigger than the scope of just this project, but it'd be well worthwhile, I think.
Because, when you shift to a new area, new property, there's probably myriad, there's hundreds of things that you've got to try and get to grips with your own property for a start, let alone all that other stuff, so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Councillor Ben Bate, you.
Actually, I really like the statement under biodiversity benefit in your submission. You talk about the general public are increasingly demanding good biodiversity outcomes. And federated farmers consider that all ratepayers should contribute financially. Pest and weed control is no longer just for the benefit of farmers, but for the wider community. And so forth. So I fully endorse that statement. That's a really important statement, and it's one of the reasons I sit here at council and the work that I do is I would like to, although landowners are the ones that actually are supposed to do the heavy lifting on behalf of us Hawke's Bay to create a better biodiversity, to improve the environment, sediment and so forth. But it's a demand we see from urban dwellers. But I think they actually need to give us a lift with doing that work as well. So, and I think John alluded to it, that in our hopes that the urban dweller actually will pay their fair share. And maybe through the submissions that we have heard today, including yours, that maybe we can just tweak that a little bit more towards the urban dwellers, because they definitely do demand it and they appreciate it, like you said before. If it's on their rate demand and they can see that they're actually contributing as well, it's a feel good system for them as well. So that's one thing that maybe we can take up in our deliberations after the hearings.
Yeah, I think if you look at the information that's out there for the Pest Free New Zealand 2050, that has a heavy biodiversity focus, so I think, and one of the pests that they are aiming to eradicate is the possum, and the reason for that is for better biodiversity outcomes. So when we include biodiversity outcomes as a benefit of possum control in the region, not just TB control, we are aligning with Pest Free New Zealand, Predator Free New Zealand.
Yep. Yeah. And we've heard earlier this morning, it's not just only possums. So, and we had a bit of a discussion about that. There will be other pests as technology will improve. We hope that will actually be added to this particular process that we are actually talking about now.
Yes.
But it's too soon to talk about that. But that's definitely where our landing spot will be in due time.
That's great.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Ben Bate. That's all we've got time for. Thanks, Ray and Jim, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
JD. Welcome.
I'm James Hewitt.
10 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. It's the first time I've ever submitted about anything, so just have to bear with me. We're strongly against this proposal. I was originally involved in our area of setting it up, and copped a bit of flack over it from various farmers because they weren't that keen, but then everyone came on board, and so, the district got a lot of benefit out of it. I don't think people would have signed up for it if it went if it wasn't the scheme it was, you change it so we have contractors coming in to do everything, I don't believe farmers would have signed up for it in the first place. And from my understanding, when it was set up, if people could get a contractor in to sort their possums out or do it themselves, and the council would monitor it, so if it wasn't being done properly, they would come in with a big stick basically and tell the farmers, hey, pull your finger out and do it. And so it's a huge cost if we get a contractor into our small place. It's it's a huge cost, and I think from a point of view of a contractor coming in, some farmers have got a contractor at the moment, others won't, unless they're forced into doing it. They're more happy to do it themselves. We do it ourselves, and last audit was 0. We're quite passionate about it. So I believe if it's falling down at the moment, it's the council not going round and communicating with farmers where it's falling down. So sort of don't punish the ones that are doing it properly at the moment. Also, if we've got contractors coming in, there's times of the year when farmers don't want them on their farms. Like this time of the year, it'd be a nightmare. And if contractors are having to do all of the area, they're going to have to do it in the winter somewhere. And there's no way we have enough trouble getting around our farm at the moment, so I wouldn't want people doing it. So I think the farmers can run a poisoning program to better suit. They can poison when they want to poison, when it suits them. And I don't agree that contractors they might be professionals, but farmers are also professionals, and they can do it just as well. And I suppose if you went down the track of contractors, you've still got to audit them, you've still got to monitor them, so nothing's really changing. So, yeah, I'm just really against being forced into another added cost to our farming business that we can actually do it a lot cheaper and I believe a lot better. That's probably all I've got to say.
Thanks, JD. Yeah. Any questions from the team?
I'll let you ask the questions first, because otherwise I'm always stealing your questions.
We'll go to the other side.
I don't mind if you go first.
If you've got one ready, you go.
Thanks, Stuart. And I've been reading through the submissions, and the large percentage is in favour. But I do get exactly what you're saying. If you've got a farm and you've actually got very good control, you maybe got a passion for getting these critters off your farm, I understand that then if we're actually going to enforce it right across, you cannot actually control that benefit. You have to just pay, and somebody will come on your farm. You could say, look, I'll keep the gate closed, I'll make sure that I'll control them. It comes at a cost. The only problem we have is, and I asked the question before to staff, is for us to control, and those farmers or those areas where there is actually where we're failing, where the numbers are just going too high, that actually comes at a cost for our council, because we have to put more people on the road. We have to come with the big stick, and that's going to take a lot of time and effort. That will come at a cost. So then at some stage we'll blow out and actually have to start rating for that anyway. So that's the answer I got. I see where you're coming from, and that you actually lose that control. But you also would know that there are properties in Hawke's Bay that are actually just completely failing, and they're not doing anything about it, and hoping that their neighbours will sort of control, and she'll be right, mate.
But wouldn't, if things are slipping at the moment, our contractor's going to sort that out? Because obviously somewhere where it's slipping at the moment is also slipping where contractors are poisoning, not just farmers doing it themselves.
Well, this,
So,
this,
is it solely just the farmers not doing the job, the contractors are doing everything A-OK?
well, there may be contractors that actually not doing a good job. I don't know. It'd be up to the farmer and his client, with the contractor, whether they're doing a right job. But we do have pockets where we know it actually is failing. And you may be doing a good job, but you know that if your neighbour isn't, the infestation will come across. As you know, possums don't know boundaries. And they can't read where the traps are. They just go wherever they want to go. You know, like you put a crop of vegetables or grass in, and they'll come. You know, so that's an issue. It's a conundrum. But in the whole process, as we talked about before, is that we will the urban ratepayers also will now take up some of the cost of doing this, because it's something that we want to do as a region, and not just only having landowners pay for this. That's what we're planning. That was my comment question.
Thanks, councillor. Yeah, JD, to be clear, we don't think the problem is arising from farmers doing a poor job or contractors doing a poor job. We think it's because no one's doing any job in these places, and that number the trend line looks to have been increasing. And so I guess a question to you is, we could put a massive amount of rangers on the road, compliance team on the road to try and target all those people, which would come at a huge cost. So should we be spending money there, or actually just spend the money and get stuck in and control the possums in the first place?
I sort of thought when we got into this that if something was slipping, the council just sent someone in to sort it out, as in a contractor, and the farmer had to pay. That was my understanding from when the scheme started. So if it's falling down somewhere, as you're saying, council sends a contractor in there and the farmers, he has to pay. He signed up to the scheme. That's what it was all about to start with.
Yeah, I guess you're not wrong, but I'm just saying, how big does that problem become before we're spending too much money on that versus just the possum control?
But that's just the monitoring, though, that the council would be spending, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so monitoring's one cost, and then the compliance on top of that. And there will always be a lag on that too, because if someone stops doing their possum control, we don't know straight away.
Yeah.
There's no way of knowing that.
Yeah.
I've got a question across there.
John?
If I could just make an observation. So thanks for your submission, James. I'm from the Waikato, and I don't profess everything was done right up there, but what we did observe was this progression over time from a community initiator, might be a care group or something, where a group of farmers got together in a similar role that you took initially, got a community motivated to undertake possum control. Then it got bigger and it expanded, and the regional council took it over as a community possum control scheme or something, and sort of assisted the community to get the work done. Then contractors became involved, and now they're looking at landscape scale, complete northwest Waikato, for example, under a contracted model. So the point I'm trying to make is it is an evolutionary sort of process, because as soon as you get scale, the ability for all landowners to do the work diminishes substantially. You'll still get the keen landowners, and I think that's the whole thing that the Animal Health Board found over time, that community groups were good for initiating possum control, but it had to go to a much wider contractor model. And I think the next step for the Hawke's Bay is to look at much wider biodiversity gains, multiple species, and I think that's really where the contractor model comes into its fore, because they can employ trapping or methods to control mustelids, possums, rats, feral cats, you name it. There'll be always the keen landowners who want to engage and do that work, but they'll certainly be in the minority, and you won't get landscape scale benefits from those probably minority of keen landowners. So I understand your concerns, but I just think you probably need to put a bit of faith in the system that it will work in the longer term. Sorry for the preaching.
No more questions.
I just wanted to say, James, well done, and I commend you for taking such great control of the pests on your property. And if everyone was as good as you, then we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Good stuff. Thanks, JD.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, last up, we've got John McPhee. Yeah, yes, please.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to represent the McPhee family. We farm Mason Ridge, which is a 750 hectare property about 30 k's southwest of Hastings. And our family's been associated with that for some 120 or 30 years. Firstly, we'd like to give the Regional Council full credit for their whole possum control initiative. The decline in possum numbers has been truly amazing, and the resulting effects on flora and fauna are credit to the work that's been carried out. Young trees, in fact all trees now thrive, bird life's improved, the garden's looking much smarter than it used to, and of course the threat of tuberculosis with cattle and deer's greatly reduced as well. So well done. Talking of deer, perhaps that could be your next project, because we can't afforest the hills with the deer running around the place at the moment. They're worse than possums. We acknowledge that a huge part of the continuing success of the project is dependent upon the ongoing control of possums. And without this work, the void would very quickly be filled and return to the devastation of the past. And prevent that from occurring, everyone involved with the land in the possum control areas has to do their bit. We've now got 150 traps or thereabouts, which we've religiously filled every year since the start, and sometimes more often. And that's our bit towards keeping the scheme going. We've had a lapse. We bought some extra land a few years ago from a neighbour who had not been doing their work. There was a lack of traps on the place as well. After we purchased the place, we couldn't get a map of the traps from the vendor, nor could we get it from the Regional Council. They didn't seem to be able to help. But that's now that situation's been sorted, been rectified. We've got lots of new bait stations. A contractor was involved to do a cyanide drop, and we're right back on target to having it the way we want it. So we acknowledge that the poisoning program, the main part of that is the use of bait stations. That's the main weapon in the poison control problem. And to be effective, they've got to be filled regularly. At Mason Ridge, it's my wife's pet project, and she ensures that all the traps are in place, missing and damaged ones are replaced, and either herself or others fill them regularly. We've got a teenage boy that lives on the farm who loves hopping his motorbike, pack full of bait, spare traps, hammer, nails, clips, etc. on his back, and going off and doing his round, which is one part of the farm. And there's grandchildren coming on that are very soon going to be able to go off on their bikes and do that job and make them feel as though they're part of the Mason Ridge team. So we fully understand, though, that not everyone's doing their bit. And we're not as conscientious as what we are, and in fact, some of our other neighbours who spend an awful amount of time and dedicated to doing their work and making sure that the possum control is up to scratch. And we also understand it's probably a nightmare for the council to monitor who's doing their bit and who isn't. But we do not feel that an across-the-board rule that all is done by a contractor is the correct solution. It's the council's responsibility to ensure that the land within their area is looked after, be it the soils, water, weed and pest, etc., etc. And ensure that all those things are being looked after and that the landowners are doing their bit. But the landowners should have the right, first of all, to carry out any work that needs to be done on their farm. It should be them first, and if they're doing it properly, I see no reason why someone else should come in and have to do it. This is the sort of, to us, the sort of start that, okay, we have to get a contract to do our possums, which are a pest. The next thing, is it going to happen that the regional council demands that we have to have a contractor to spray our thistles and our gorse, etc., because possibly, theoretically, we aren't capable of doing it. Some people do it, some people don't. Certainly, if a landowner is not following the rules as required by the council, then the council should have the power to insist that the poisoning program in this case is carried out correctly. And if this involves having a contractor come onto the property, that's fine. And then the landowner should be responsible and have to pay for it. It shouldn't be the council's responsibility. If the landowners aren't doing their job, then it's up to them to pay to get it sorted. At the moment, in the present regime, the 5-yearly audit is the way that you're ensuring that things are up to scratch or not. Too long a period, in our mind, numbers can explode in that area, and perhaps that audit period needs to be shorter. Now, we can understand how the council thinks, well, who's doing the job and who isn't? And surely even one just practical way of seeing that whether farmers are doing it or not is that annually we might have to provide copies of our invoices for our bait, which would then give the council knowledge that we're buying the bait and we're obviously not going to leave it sitting on the shelves because it's not cheap. So we're going to go off and do our job. So a contractor comes along, we're saying we have to audit the farmers to make sure they do it right. Then there is also a necessity that the contractors have got to be audited to make sure that they're doing the job properly too. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Now, farming's suffering more and more these days with regulations and expense in today's environment especially. Some of them are fair enough, others appear to be just another leech, another sort of leech on our income, unearned money. There's another reason to, we'll snaffle a bit there and we'll get a bit there and we'll get a bit there. And we don't agree with that. Apart from the fact that filling our own bait stations helps the family and staff at Mason Ridge feel part of the whole farm story, we should not have to have further expense by employing a contractor to do a job we are fully capable of doing and currently do successfully. It's in our best interest to do this as part of caring for the land that we are the current guardians of. Just in the same way we look after our water and our soils, we need to control our weeds and our pests, farm in a sustainable way to ensure the health of our land. Because if we don't ensure the health of our land, we are not there to do it. We're not going to succeed. So that's what our family's got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you
Questions?
very much. Any questions?
Sorry. These people all want to go home, you see, but I've got questions. So when I read your submission, I wrote in big bold red, has a point. You definitely do make a point, as James did as well. And my question was, I've got two questions. How much do you think you pay now in control? Because the boy who lives on the farm, although it's a great job, hopefully he doesn't do it for free, because otherwise you have to stop the recording, because you'll be in breach of some labour law. But how much does it cost now on your farm to actually control possums?
If you want me to give you an exact figure, I wouldn't have a clue.
But roundabout.
Well, do I pay my wife or not? I'm not too sure. So she doesn't put an invoice in. The young lad that does it lives on a cottage on the farm. He has the use of the farm to go and ride his bike on, and part of the way of paying for that is to fill the bait stations up. So we don't hand over any cash to go and fill bait stations up at all. I do some of it, my son does some of it. We take Sue for a tiki tour around and she'll fix some. So I suppose it would take us, I don't know, maybe we'd do the whole lot in a day. 8 hours it would take us, but we're not forking out money to do it.
Okay, apart from the bait.
Apart from the bait.
And the bait station.
And the traps, if we have to get some more traps. And we occasionally have bought some more traps. We've had them supplied at times, but we do tend to buy them ourselves.
Good. So the next question, you gave a little bit of an idea of how we possibly could monitor if a farmer is doing something right or wrong. And use of bait is one example. Are there any other ways that you can think of that we could put in place so that we actually almost remote monitor via a return sheet to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, just to see whether a farmer is actually on target, and if we don't receive any of the information, we may actually send a ranger down his drive, and we see a few other more things that we may have to look at. Are there any other things that you could think of that could be a remote control model?
Well, technology in this day and age, if there's no endless supply of money, you can do all sorts of things. We could have cameras, we could, that type of thing, I'm sure. But I just feel mainly the practical way is that maybe this audit period, whether it's a contractor doing or whatever, should be less, that those bait lines maybe should be put in an area, maybe a larger area, more often than every 5 years, because if someone's not doing it for 5 years, things are getting pretty out of control after 5 years. So if that monitoring was done a little bit more often, perhaps not quite in this depth, but there were random lines put around the place, that would, I feel, be better than what's happening at the moment.
Councillor Lambert.
Yeah, hi, just a quick one, and it's you're the first one to talk about the farm story, and I can appreciate that. You've obviously got a lot of history with it. How important is that story to you to...
Oh, very, very important. You know, my family came out to Mariakoko Station in the 1880s, and we've been associated with that land since then, having farmed it in our own right. My son's the 5th generation. So it's part of us. We are the guardians of that land at the moment, and we have a responsibility to look after it and make sure it's going forward, not back. And because of that, I've been involved in catchment groups and all that side of it as well. But yeah, the health of our land and everything is pretty important, and the whole having those of us that live on it and work on the land as being part of the farming operation, part of the story, is very, very important.
Thank you.
John?
Just to clarify, John, you referred to 150 traps are maintained. Are you referring to bait stations?
Bait stations, sorry, bait stations.
Okay.
Right, well, yeah, thanks, John. I haven't really got a question because you kind of presented so well. And it's guys like you and JD before you that kind of make our decision very hard, because there's guys out there like you that are doing a great job, and that's not, as Councillor Taylor said in the last submission, that's not what we're here for. So Thank you very much for your submission, and yeah, we'll have to think pretty hard about, how we pull all this together to obviously recognise the good work that you're doing, but somehow capture where the work's not getting done. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, there's a number of us in our district that are pretty passionate about what we do and doing it, and we'll be pretty upset if we get told we can't do it. So do that.
Well, we won't stop you doing it. We won't stop you doing it.
I do have a question actually, just from what you last said. So, because in your area there's a lot of passionate people about looking after their properties well and getting rid of the possums, if you knew of someone in your area, if suddenly you're getting more possums into your properties and you think it's coming from over there, what would you do what would you do?
Probably have a little word in someone's ear and say, "Oi, so and so's not doing it."
And what if they don't change?
Sorry.
And what if they don't do anything about it?
No, I'm thinking that we talk. I've just to the side of being involved with catchment groups and setting that up, and the same thing came. If someone's not doing the job, what do we do? So we start off by maybe mentioning it to the person. Hey, you're not doing your possum work, and if they don't do anything, well, then we have to perhaps mention to the regional council that so and so is not doing their possum work, and maybe they need to
Right.
go and have a look, because it's in our vested interest for the whole thing to work.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
And some farmers you can talk to direct as a neighbour, others you don't, So
Yes.
you pick your battles.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
John. Right, well, that brings our hearings to a close. So thanks once again to all our submitters today, and also not just those spoken to, but our 150 total submissions that we have. Just like to re-emphasise what Lauren said this morning about our deliberations. So they will be held on the 6th of September. So we need our full committee there, please, to give us time to then take that back to council. So we'll look forward to seeing everyone there. John, you got a last question?
Well, it's really just pending the deliberations. What would assist me, and I think probably also the working group, is to get some information on the rating impacts. And I mean, I just jumped on the rating database and picked out 3 properties at random. One's an orchard type property, one's a residential property, and one's a 544 hectare property. It really needs a forestry property as another example also. But it would be useful if we could be shown the impact on the general rate and on the targeted rate of what the changes proposed are going to be. It, to my mind, shouldn't be too difficult to model it on the existing rating data. So I guess my request is, can the committee or can the working group make a request to staff that information be provided in advance of the deliberations?
Because we're not actually in the hearings process anymore, probably. Do you want to speak to that?
So yes, Chair, I can. And look, this has been the kind of perennial issue that we've grappled with through this process. So independent of this, Council's undertaking a comprehensive review of its revenue and financing policy. It's in fact right in the middle of a series of workshops to consider that right now. This area of work doesn't escape that, so it will be subject to change of some description, and we can't tell you what that is now and what it will look like in the future. All we could do really is give you the current indication and tell you what the costs are now based on the current model. There could be a very broad indication of what a future scenario might look like, but we can't give you any certainty around that because it's really subject to council deliberations over the coming weeks and months to finalise how revenue is going to be obtained through its various rating mechanisms and tools it's got. And I guess probably the final comment would really be that if council agrees to make the change to the pest management plan and provide the opportunity for council to do landscape scale contract control of possums, how that is operationalised from that point forward through council programs of work will be considered as part of the long-term plan development, including sequencing. So it's unlikely that we would start the program at a large scale in year one. It might, and we've got the option of scaling or phasing the build up to that over, anywhere between 1 and 10 years, for example. So those costs will be different depending on the various scenarios that might be at play to operationalise the new policy. So it's going to be really difficult to give you any certainty or accuracy about what those figures will look like.
Hard to make a decision if we can't at least have some vision on that.
We can, like I say, we can give you some indications,
Yeah.
but as you appreciate, you are right now considering how you will target your rates or where your rates, how your policies will apply to your various revenue streams. So the decisions you make in that exercise will potentially impact this work and could fundamentally change whatever advice we provide you.
Well, I'm going to look ratepayers in the eye and say, well, we've made this decision, but sorry, I didn't know it was going to be X, Y, Z. I thought it was here. So I need to have at least some vision so that I can make a decision.
I'll just be clear, we'll be making a decision to advise council.
That's
So
right. Yeah. But anything comes down to the dollar, and you can hear that quite clearly today of the people, of our landowners who actually do this work, that there is actually a cost involved for them.
I think bear in mind that you've considered some options for your the way you'd rate this area of work, and I think you've agreed that the approach you've taken in the past is not the one you'll take forward in the future, and that there's a greater cost, or there's a greater community that should be sharing some of the costs of this work. So that's one immediate sort of change to the way we're operating, but it'll make a big difference as to where that falls in terms of the proportions. But it's fair to say that the intent, and certainly the advice from staff, is that because the program of work is oriented at our biodiversity ambitions as a council, not in managing agricultural pests or trying to be the vector manager for TB, is that those benefits are broader to the community and those costs should be shared more broadly with the community. So, whether it's the direct rating cost or the opportunity cost for a landowner, we would say will be less in the future if you're a rural landowner than it is today. But can I tell you exactly what that is? And could we give you a table that bases it on a land use and a rating unit around the region? We've tried to work with the finance team to do that, and it's proved really, really difficult to do.
Want to finish the submissions off so we can
we'll finish submissions.
pitch that, or we want to keep going?
No, we've got to close the meeting first. John, you got one last.
I'm a bit like my colleague over here, Jeff, that I'm going to find it hard to make a decision when I don't have a good feel of what the financial implications are. Right now, I agree with you, Ian, that in the future, the next step will be a funding review, and that might even move to general rating on a capital value basis. Who knows? That will put major changes, I guess, in terms of your rating overall. But at the moment, I think we can only judge this policy change on the impact on a rating incidence right here and now. And I think the council should be able to do that.
So, sorry, just for clarification, you're talking about the current model under the current structure? Yes, we can do that. But
That's all I'm asking for.
All I'm indicating is that it's going to change in the future.
Yep, I accept that, but at the moment, We're making a decision under the current here and now.
And I appreciate that. I guess the difficulty in giving you that advice is that will give you a very skewed picture of what the future's going to be, because the discussion amongst council around its future for rating this work is completely different to the one it is now. So if you're basing a decision on the current rating model, and that's going to change in the future, your decision making is going to be challenged.
That's our brief, is to make a policy change recommendation to council now. If the council changes its funding model and mixture, that's for the council to take into consideration down the track, in my view.
So, Chair, if it helps, what we can do is we can pull together a bit of a paper that sort of summarises this for you, and we can lay out for you what we know, what the current model and the process that's going forward that might help your decision making. So we can certainly provide that.
Yeah, one of the points I've heard today is there are a number of landowners passionate, doing their own stuff pretty cost effectively, and unless we can demonstrate to them that this new model will be more cost effective and save them money, we're up against it.
Through you, Chair, and we're sort of getting into the deliberation discussions, but it depends entirely on what your end state is that you desire. So if we're looking at a regional, landscape scale regional biodiversity proposition, then focusing on individual land units isn't going to give you that view and perspective. So I guess that's the conundrum, as Councillor Van Beek said, that's your conundrum before you, is that yes, there are people who are successfully doing the work themselves on their own and their own parcel of land and isolation of the land around them, but is that contributing to our healthy, resilient, climate smart biodiversity? Probably in a very, very small way. Could we achieve more if that was scaled across a whole catchment? Absolutely it would.
It's no argument, I know, but we've got these perspectives to take into account.
Sure.
Look, and we'll continue that discussion on the 6th. Is there any other questions or information that the committee would like to ask or comment on before we get to that date?
I enjoyed listening to all those submissions.
Me too.
I think the only one I didn't fully appreciate, we weren't going to have a forestry perspective speak to the meeting, so I'm going to have to go back and look at their submissions again.
Yeah.
That's obviously one of the big gaps in the process at the moment, is that they're not adequately dealing with possums on their property.
And I thought it was really good, and we've still got them in the room, that actually contractors actually took their time out to come as well and even listen to what's being discussed. So that actually was really helpful. So thanks for spending your time here.
Very dedicated fellow.
No, I think
We'll rate you back, no problem. We know where you live now, Bayview, Citrus Rock. I know where your mailbox is.
we got a good range, in our papers there, and speaking today, I think we've got a very good diverse range of views, and it's what you always want in this process. Lauren and Mark, have you got anything final to?
No, I've got nothing further to add. If we can please just confirm 6th of September, that would be great. That's all from me.
Great. Okay. Oh, well, look, Councillor Lambert, would you like to do the honours again?
Sure.
Since you opened
Sure, we'll do it together. Kia tātou katoa, te atapaia tō tātou āriki a ihu karaiti, me te taroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki tō wairua tapu, ake.
Amen.
Kia ora.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Ron.